oh, this song has guitar in it, it must be rock. No, I did a huge iceberg on metal music, and so many people have asked me to do the same with punk, so that's what we're doing today. You already know how it goes. Layer 1 is the genres everyone knows. And as we go through the layers, the genres will become more obscure and weird and spooky. Let's get on with it. I'ma be transparent with you. I'm pretty broke, so I have merch, and there's some pretty cool designs on there. Go ahead and check it out if you're in the market for some clothes, or maybe swag out your fridge a bit. I know it's looking a little rough. Make it pretty. Have some Vizzy magnets on it. Support your boy if you can. No pressure. On with the video. Layer 1. The everybody knows and have probably heard on like Disney Channel or something.
Punk rock.
Punk rock, aka punk, is a genre that spawned in the mid-70s. Rooting from 1950s rock and roll and 1960s garage rock, punk is usually short and fast-paced and have these hard-edged melodies and singing styles with stripped-down instrumentation. Pay attention to what I'm about to say, because to continue this iceberg, you need to know this information. Typically, the lyrics are revolved around anti-establishment and anti-authoritarian. Punk embraces a DIY ethic. Punk bands like to record and mix and master everything themselves, and when they release shit, it's typically an independent release or through an independent record label. If you want a taste of what early punk was like, go ahead and listen to the Ramones. They're often cited as one of the first punk bands because they're the ones that really solidified like the overall aesthetic and codifying the sound that would kind of define the genre. Their first album from 1976 really established a lot of punk's like core elements. But don't get it twisted, because in 1960s and early 70s, there was a few bands that really laid the groundwork for punk. And these bands have their own sphere, which is called proto-punk. Not necessarily a subgenre, but we'll touch more on that later. Because now we have to yap about
Alternative rock.
This is similar to everyone calling a song with clean singing and screams and breakdowns metalcore. Alt rock is kind of a big gray mess. It could even be considered an umbrella term because you have a band like Nirvana that's considered alt rock. But Bring Me the Horizon can also be alt rock. But the reason why I'm including alternative rock is because alt rock and punk have kind of an intertwined history. I'm gonna make it easy to understand, and same thing with every genre on this iceberg. I want to make it as simple as possible, because keep in mind, not only is the goal for you to learn, but me too. I'm not no fucking genre god. Like 90% of these genres I had to fucking research myself. So punk created the blueprint of making music outside of the mainstream. So alternative rock took that blueprint and kind of expanded on it. Alternative rock is basically the child of punk that went to college and became artsy, growing up with the rebellious values of punk, but kind of did its own thing. That's all I'm gonna tell you for now, but if you're interested, go ahead and do your research. It's pretty cool. Some classic alt-rock bands could be considered the Smashing Pumpkins, the White Stripes, and Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Pop punk.
You may laugh at me, but I don't give a shit. Pop punk is my bread and butter. It is my favorite genre of all time. More specifically, the Fend pop punk sad boy era of like 2012 to 2015. But anyway, pop punk is exactly how it sounds. It takes pop elements like the catchy vocals and song structures, along with the fast-paced, loud, distorted guitars like in-your-face punk elements. There's bands that lean way more towards pop, like State Champs, All Time Low, Water Parks. Then you got bands that lean way more towards punk, like Koyo, The Story So Far, some earlier Neck Deep, as these bands are way more angsty and in your face and sometimes sound like hardcore. First wave of pop punk are bands like Descendants, Bad Religion, Green Day, The Offspring. Then came another wave in late 90s with bands like Blink-182, NoFX, Newfound Glory, who then started easycore, which is another rabbit hole. But this is the punk iceberg, not pop punk. Maybe I'll do that if enough people want it. Now that I thought of it, I really want to do it. I love pop punk. I can talk about it for hours. Welcome to layer 2. If you give cool music the slightest bit of attention, you more than likely know all these genres I'm about to bring up in this layer, starting with
hardcore.
Hardcore is a big one. This is a genre that's going to be littered throughout this video because of how important and influential it is, so pay attention. If you look at punk, it's basically rock music's angry cousin. It's faster, it's rougher, but you can still sing along to it. Like I said, the Ramones or Sex Pistols. Hardcore punk, also known as hardcore, is even angrier sibling. There's more screaming and yelling to the mic. The songs are faster. Songs could be shorter, and overall, it's just a way more aggressive genre. You could think of Black Flag or Minor Threat. But a huge part of hardcore is the culture. Sharing the same values that OG punk had and even expanding on it a bit. Fuck the system, fuck authority, do shit yourself. Fuck the mainstream. Accept one another. Be inclusive. I know hardcore seems intimidating or scary, or like there's a bunch of big tough guys in the pit, I don't belong here, but it's actually the opposite. Hardcore culture don't give a shit who you are or how you look. They accept you for you as long as you're not a shitty person. You'll notice hardcore is big on politics and social activism. This culture gives a shit and really wants to see change. Of course, there's bad apples in this scene. Like, I'm sure if you go to enough shows, you'll see that one guy with a drinking problem and uses crowd killing as an excuse to try to beat people up. But overall, the scene wants to see personal growth and self-improvement. Like, there's straight edge culture and shit, which we'll touch more on later.
Ska punk.
This combines ska music and punk. And 9 out of 10 times, there's some form of brass instruments. And this is a genre that actually got a little bit of that mainstream light, because you had bands like Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake, Sublime, and No Doubt. And to this day, this is a genre that has a huge cultivated scene. You have bands like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Streetlight Manifesto, Operation Ivy, the Scotalites being so fucking important. It's just fun, man. Just upstrum guitar work, marrying brass instruments, and just having the speed of punk. It's so fun. Someone once told me that mozzarella sticks reminded them of ska punk, and it's kind of accurate.
Post-hardcore.
I forgot who told me this, but someone said think of post as influenced by. So in this case, we have post-hardcore, influenced by hardcore. But what does this mean? It just means to play with the genre a bit, right? So you have hardcore roots and elements, but you have fun, you expand, you try to evolve the sound. And this is another one that becomes an umbrella term, because some of the earlier bands like Helmet brought in more heavier and metallic elements. Drive Like Jehu, and I know I butchered that name, I'm so fucking sorry. They added math rock elements and like these complex song structures. Fugazi came in and played their part by blending punk with complex rhythms and socially conscious lyrics. Then later down the line, you have bands like Dance Gavin Dance, Hail the Sun, Title Fight, that all fall under this post-hardcore umbrella, but sound nothing alike, nor sound anything like hardcore. Evolution, man. It does things to you. We were like fish and then monkeys or some shit back in the day.
Skate punk.
Skate punk is what happens when a bunch of hardcore kids pick up skating. JFA is one of the first bands to directly connect punk and skating. Then you got Suicidal Tendencies. They had a track, Possessed to Skate, which was huge in the skating scene. Then time started moving, and it feels like skate punk kind of evolved into pop punk. Late 80s, early 90s, you had bands like NoFX, Pennywise, and RKL. These bands shaped skate punk into the sound we knew and loved. I'm sure you know, but Warped Tour is and was important. They helped push bands and the skate punk culture as a whole by combining a music festival with skating. Skate punk is the grandfather of pop punk and started to pass the torch when bands like Green Day, The Offspring, Blink-182, and Sum 41 started coming into the picture. Welcome to Layer 3. This is when shit starts to get interesting.
Emo.
This is another one of my favorite foods. Today, if you think of the word emo, you might envision someone that looks like Johnny Gilbert. You might see emo more as a style or particular fashion rather than a music genre. And that's because emo became more than music. It became its own entity. We're just gonna focus on the music in this video. Handful of bands, but most notably, Rites of Spring and Embrace, helped pioneer the genre in the Washington, D.C. scene in the mid-80s. And it spread throughout the country like a plague. But a good one. A really good one. Emo wasn't My Chemical Romance or Panic at the Disco yet. Emo was hardcore, but with emotional lyrics and vocal style. Even experimenting with hardcore, leaning more towards the OG post-hardcore style. Eventually spawning into a few different camps or flavors of emo. You had the OG emo-core bands, like I said, Rites of Spring and Embrace. But you also had emo pop-punk bands like Jawbreaker and Sunny Day Real Estate. You also had Midwest emo with bands like Captain Jazz and The Promise Ring, which was basically post-hardcore but had math rock elements, the noodly twinkly guitar riff, and the band looks like a bunch of motherfuckers cosplaying as Michael Cera. Then you have Screamo, aka Scrams, which we'll touch on later. But these four emo camps kind of evolved in their own sphere. But in my opinion, the best modern day emo bands are the ones that like to take a little bit of influence from all four camps. For example, Ben Quad or Origami Angel. But if you enjoy the heavier sides of emo, I got you covered. We're gonna talk about Scrams later.
Melodic hardcore.
Melodic hardcore is when a hardcore band emphasizes more on the melody, using like their vocal style or guitar work. But you may be asking yourself, Lizzie, isn't that just post-hardcore? And my answer to that is kind of. Think of it like this. Hardcore punk with a strong emphasis on melody, emotional vocals, and staying relatively close to the core of the hardcore sound would be melodic hardcore. As for post-hardcore, think of hardcore as an empty canvas, and post-hardcore is like taking influence from this genre and another splatter of paint in this genre, and we're having fun and experimenting. So songwriting can be more diverse. Melodic hardcore could be bands like Defeater, Touche Amore, and Being as an Ocean. But if you look at their Wikipedias, you'll notice all of these bands will also be considered post-hardcore. And that goes to show how thin the line is between melodic hardcore and post-hardcore.
Post-punk.
Remember what I said, post-punk is influenced by punk. Post-punk keeps the DIY ethics and values, but instead of going towards this heavy direction, the genre kind of leans towards the opposite way, being way more experimental, even using elements outside of the rock umbrella. You'll see bands use funk or electronic shit or jazz. A really good example of this is Joy Division. Not only are they one of the first to do it, but in my opinion, they're also one of the best. Some of the members from Joy Division moved on to a newer project that was titled New Order. And this is when we can see the post-punk experimental nature. Before moving on to the next genre, I have to mention one man. His name is Martin Hannett, being the producer to bands like A Certain Ratio, Magazine, Happy Mondays, and of course, as previously mentioned, Joy Division and New Order. And all of these bands were super important and influential during the rise of post-punk in the UK, along with Factory Records in the late 70s, early 80s. Now we're at layer 4, and I feel like you gotta be in the scene to know this shit. And by the way, this is a good time to mention, I think I mentioned it earlier, I'm not no fucking genre encyclopedia. I had to do my own research for most of these genres. Even the ones I do know, I still did my research because I want to make sure what I'm saying is as accurate as possible. However, I'm a human being. I get shit wrong. Things slip through the cracks. But I did my absolute best to ensure all of these definitions are as accurate as possible. Whatever. Let's go. Let's move on.
Scram/Screamo.
While we were talking about emo, I mentioned that I was going to bring up Scrams later, and here's that later. Growing up, a lot of people assumed any genre of music that had screams in it is considered screamo, but that's not the case. Motionless in White is screamo. Attila is screamo. No, none of them are screamo. Attack Attack, the techno shit, that's not crabcore. That's not screamo. That's crabcore. Okay, that's metalcore. And I love that band. However, they're not screamo. Screamo is a subgenre of emo that spawned in the late 90s. Bands like Page 99, Orchid, and I Hate Myself started doing this style of emo core that emphasized on screaming the lyrics. They made the rhythms a little more complex, the sound was more intense and chaotic, while obviously staying true to the traditional emo lyrics. Talking about heartbreaks, being self-deprecating, I fucking hate myself, shorty broke my heart. And today we have bands that absolutely destroy this sound, okay? You gotta check out Dreaming Maria, you gotta check out Emily Grimm, you gotta check out Senza. These are talented motherfuckers. They're all so good.
Anarcho-punk.
Also known as peace punk. This is basically any genre of punk that promotes anarchism. You get it. This word. This is one of those genres that don't really influence anything musically. It's more lyrical. Some known bands in the genre are Poison Girls and Crass.
Thrashcore.
This is when you take hardcore and just 2x that bitch. In the early 80s, you had bands like Deep Wound and Siege that started fusing hardcore with thrash metal influence, using blast beats, being more aggressive, and playing songs that were kinda simple but were impressively fast. This is that perfect in between of hardcore and grindcore. Some modern and notable bands in this genre are bands like Spaz, Trash Talk, and Infest. However, there is a fine line.
Power violence.
This is basically taking thrashcore and pushing it even further to an extreme length. Songs are shorter, more abrasive, chaotic, just ADHD shit, you feel me? I do want to mention that some consider Man is the Bastard as the power violence pioneers, but of course, like anything else, the first to do anything is often argued. But write this down. After this video, you have to check out Zulu. Okay? You're gonna come back after you listen to Zulu, then you're gonna thank me, I promise. Honestly, if you're a fan of thrashcore or power violence, you will absolutely love the other genre, so just go explore and have fun.
Crossover.
This is when you take hardcore and thrash and you just blend them together. You may think that this is what thrashcore is, but that's not the case. The difference is crossover is more influenced by thrash metal, while thrashcore is a subgenre that branches off of hardcore. So crossover is more for the fans of thrash metal that want that punk energy, while thrashcore is more for people who enjoy hardcore but want to hear it pushed to its limit in terms of speed and intensity. Again, fine line. Bands could be both of these genres. Suicidal Tendencies are both thrashcore, crossover, and even skate punk. But I think Municipal Waste is a good example for crossover. Go check them out. And a quick note, I'm sure if you listen to music you already know this, but in a band's discography, maybe they'll have a pop punk song and then a song that's more emo lenient and then a song that's more, I don't know, like an acoustic shit, right? That doesn't mean that this is an acoustic band, it just means that they are a band that plays X genres. I just wanted to make that clear because I don't want somebody to get confused. If I say a band is crossover, that doesn't mean they never had a history of playing, I don't know, like post-hardcore or some shit.
Straight edge hardcore.
Hardcore straight edge is both a musical scene and a lifestyle. It came from hardcore in the early 80s. You'll hear bands sing about a straight edge lifestyle. The overall message is you don't have to drink or do drugs to rebel against society. Some people take straight edge culture even further by avoiding caffeine, by eating a vegan diet, and by avoiding casual sex. Yeah, that's by choice. And to be honest, lyrically, this is as positive as it gets. Bands love talking about self-improvement, standing by your beliefs, and even calling out drug abuse, which is pretty cool. Not for me. I love Bud Light, however, I respect the fuck out of this scene. But like every scene, there's extremists, and some of these motherfuckers will try to make you feel bad for your life choices. Brother, I just ate a turkey sandwich, okay? I didn't go to the farm, I didn't murk the thing. I just put like 3 slices on my fucking cheese and mayo, all right? Leave me alone. Bands like Minor Threat, Earth Crisis, and Have Heart are great bands to check out in this scene. Welcome to layer 5, where we start getting into really cool shit. If I mention a band that's not really associated with said genre, don't smite me, alright? I'm sorry. I tried my best, but if you want to add on to subgenres, feel free in the comments, be like, oh, hey, you like Psychobilly? Check out this band. Speaking of
Psychobilly.
This is what happens when you blend punk and rockabilly. They take rockabilly and add punk elements to it, meaning the music would be played super fast. Not only that, but they like to add horror film aesthetics. You're probably thinking to yourself, how the fuck is punk and horror connected? Stay tuned, we touch on that in layer 7. But lyrically, you typically have references to science fiction, horror and exploitation films, violence, things of that nature. But unlike traditional punk, Psychobilly takes an apolitical stance. Songs aren't about social activism and rebelling against the man. Bands to check out here are the Meteors, the Cramps, and the Coffin Cats.
Folk punk.
You're gonna notice that a lot of these genres are self-explanatory. You take folk, You take punk, you make a hybrid. So imagine punk but with added acoustic elements like the banjo, accordion, and a violin. Of course, in punk nature, it is a fast genre. Lyrics are typically political and anti-establishment, while this emerged in the early 80s. It's a pretty fun genre overall, and you could check out like the Front Bottoms as a modern example, but Classic Against Me and AJJ are solid examples of a more traditional sound.
Two-tone.
Two-tone is the second wave of ska punk. It gets its name from Two-Tone Records, who was founded by Jerry Dammers, not too sure, of the Specials in 1979. This record label signed a shitload of ska bands and helped push this genre into more ears. This is when ska started forming itself into what it eventually came to be, the black and white checkered aesthetic, skanking, and being one of the most successful attempts to use music to fight racism in Britain. The reason why the checkered pattern is black and white is literally because it symbolized racial unity. Check out the Specials, Madness, and the Untouchables.
Garage punk.
Garage punk is a combination of punk and garage rock. And I'm sure you can tell from the name, it's absolutely gotta sound like you recorded it in your garage. Extremely into the DIY culture, like I mentioned earlier, recording shit yourself, releasing shit yourself, or through an independent record label. It's kind of hard to describe the sound, dead ass, lo-fi, and ugly, and distorted, and shouty. And the perfect example is The Retards, which is an absolutely insane band name.
Youth Crew hardcore.
Youth Crew was a hardcore punk movement that started in the mid-80s in New York City. Instead of the lyrics focusing on wanting to kill the system, it was focused on not only straight edge culture, but friendship, loyalty, positivity, and being uplifting. It was meant to ensure that kids that were into this kind of music kind of stood on the right path. And since we're talking about it, the name was actually taken from the youth of today's song, Youth Crew.
Pogo.
Pogo is a type of dance you do in the pit. You basically jump around to the music and push each other. So Pogo Punk is a genre that basically encourages this dance. For example, if you hear a drum pattern that sounds like, you know it's time to two-step. Or if you hear circle pit, circle pit. Pogo is high energy, it's fast, aggressive, driving, using up-tempo beats, drawing its musical elements from the classic UK-82, Oi, and street punk movements. Don't know what that is? That's fine, it's coming in the next layer, but for now,
Prog punk.
this is the blend of punk and progressive rock. Most of the time, it's way more progressive rock sounding, but it has the attitude and the energy from punk married with it. Key elements are things like the song structures. They're more complex. Songs tend to be longer. The instruments tend to be more technical and have out of the ordinary time signatures while maintaining punk's energy. And as a whole, it just sounds way more sophisticated.
Experimental punk.
Here I'm gonna have to do the genre versus genre thing again. Experimental, prog, it could be very gray. We're gonna explain it. Experimental punk focuses on breaking the rules and being unconventional. Bands might use weird sounds, noise, or completely ignore typical song structures, as they seem to focus more on the artsy side rather than flexing their musical talents. While prog punk, on the other hand, is more technically complex. Easy way to put it, again, let's bust out that empty canvas. Experimental punk fellas be like, I'm throwing paint at the canvas and this is abstract art. Prog punk be like, I'm making it really artsy and detailed and doing extreme planning right now. And fuck it, let's throw avant punk here too.
Avant punk.
This is really close to experimental punk. So close, people don't really give a shit if you call it avant punk or experimental, unless they're annoying. The main difference is that avant punk tends to lean more heavily on the art side of things, often taking inspiration from avant-garde classical music or art movements. Oh wait, how about we make it messier? What's
Art punk.
This is the daddy of the three. This is the umbrella term used for this corner of artsy, nerdy styles of punk. So let's take this hot mess and make it as easy to understand as possible. Art punk focuses on artistic expression and creativity. Think of it as punk meets art school. For example, Talking Heads. And again, this is the umbrella term, so all of these genres do exactly this. Avant punk takes punk and makes it really weird and artsy, often influenced by classical avant-garde music. The approach is very intellectual. Prog punk makes punk music complex and technical with difficult time signatures and skilled musicians. Experimental punk breaks all the rules and tries unusual things, often chaotic and raw, and just focuses on being different rather than skilled. Now let's breathe. Hope you understand. Let's talk about
crust punk.
Now, this is a subgenre of punk that combines anarcho-punk and heavy metal, rooting from UK and the early 80s. It's raw, it's gritty, it has a heavy sound using fast-paced guitar riffs, while the lyrics are pretty often political. It addresses social issues like class struggles, anti-capitalism, environmentalism, it's anti-war and anti-fascism. But this is more than a music genre, as it's also a lifestyle, very similar to straight edge. I'm not saying crust and straight edge are similar, I'm just saying they're both similar as in it's more than music. Like most punk, there's a DIY aesthetic, handmade merchandise, self-recorded albums, a general disinterest in mainstream success. But taking this even further, people will sometimes drop out of society and live in squats, purposely going homeless, rejecting traditional values and consumerism. They don't like to worry so much about hygiene or fresh clothes, seeing that more as a symbol of rejection of mainstream fashion and focus on functionality. They'll wear recycled clothes. Why? Because it works. A shirt is a shirt. It don't gotta be $3,000. I suggest you check out the rabbit hole because it's pretty deep, it's pretty cool, I like it. But for now, I'll leave you with the band Nausea. We are now on layer 6, and yes, I have different clothes because it's the next day. If you know these genres I'm about to touch on, I think you should be making this video. In this layer, we're gonna touch on the genres that kind of started movements. I'm also gonna use this layer to set up for other genres I'm gonna mention, because sometimes you need to know one genre to understand a different one. So hopefully that makes sense, but whatever. You'll see what I mean later. For now, let's bust out those notepads and start learning. Let's get into some history lessons here.
Street punk.
Street punk emerged in the early 80s. It was birthed in the UK as a tougher working class version of punk rock. Think of it as punk's tough working class cousin who's proud of being from the streets and isn't afraid to show it. It's meant to be straightforward, angry, and speak on everyday people's struggles. The overall message for street punk is basically, this is where I'm from, this is who I am, and I'm fucking proud of it. But this scene did break off to two different branches, which is the anarcho-punk scene and the oi scene, which we're obviously going to touch on in a bit. But the band UK Subs had an album in 1979. It was titled Another Kind of Blues, and this is one of the earliest examples of street punk.
UK 82.
This is basically street punk, but instead of it being punk, it's hardcore punk. Three huge bands of this scene were The Exploited, Discharged, and JBH. Lyrics from these bands in UK 82 as a whole tended to be darker and more violent, focusing on things like a potential apocalypse, because of the renewal of tensions from the Cold War era of the planet, which was from 1979 to 1985. Not only that, but speaking up about unemployment, saying fuck the conservatives and fuck Margaret Thatcher specifically, who was the Prime Minister of the UK at the time.
UK 77.
UK 77 marks the explosive rise of punk in the UK around 1977, characterized by its anti-establishment ethics, unique music style, and fashion that became iconic. I know throughout this list I kind of bubbled punk into one big scene, but the reality is, there was the UK scene and the United States scene. The UK punk scene was actually super important and influential and kind of shaped the scene as a whole. I just didn't know exactly how to script separating the two scenes, but I'm going to use this opportunity to do so. While both American and UK punk shared a rebellious spirit and DIY ethics, there were differences in their musical styles, political stances, and cultural contexts. For example, American punk was rooted from rock and roll and liked the fast-paced shit with simple chord structures. Examples being Ramones, Television, and Blondie. While UK punk, represented by bands like Sex Pistols, The Clash, and The Damned, they embraced a raw, aggressive sound often used by fast tempos, loud guitars, and a confrontational attitude. While American punk bands often addressed social issues, their lyrics were less political than the UK scene. The American bands sang about alienation, and they were angsty and rebellious against the existing state of the world. But in the UK, the punk movement came up as a response to the high unemployment rate, social inequality, inequality and just being pissed at their political circumstances. And that led to this highly political and anti-establishment stance. They wanted change and they used punk as an attempt to get this change. Not to say that American punk wasn't political, right? Like, listen to the Dead Kennedys. They were super political, but it just wasn't as prominent as the UK scene. We can roast the UK for their teeth. We can roast their beans on toast for breakfast, but no one can deny how fucking important the UK punk scene was as a whole. And for that, thank you. I will try beans on toast.
Taqwa-core.
Taqwa-core is punk that explores Islam and its culture. The name of this subgenre was coined after Michael Muhammad Knight's 2003 novel, The Taqwa-cores. It was a book about a conservative college student who moves into a house inhabited by fellow Muslims that were all into punk. There's a movie on it too, and after watching the trailer, I really want to see it. Imagine trying to be Muslim and punk at the same time. Like, can you really be true to your religion while maintaining this lifestyle? But musically, it's not just punk, because sometimes they play with the sound using rap, techno, and having rhycore influences. Bands here would include Haram, Alien Culture, and the Kaminas.
Noise punk.
Noise punk is exactly how it sounds. It's punk, but would probably give you a headache if you listen to it too much. Combining punk with noise music's harsh experimental sounds, this is a genre that came to be in the late 70s, early 80s, using heavy feedback, distortion, being abrasive, chaotic, and being recorded on a toaster because of how raw it sounds. And sometimes bands would even go to this far extent of just bashing random shit together like they're cavemen. Notable bands here would be acts like Melt Banana, Lightning Bolt, and if you want a band that's noisy but a little more structured, I'd suggest you check out Jesus Lizard.
Pub rock.
Pub rock is obviously a subgenre of rock music. It emerged in the early to mid 70s in the United Kingdom, and what made it different from standard rock was its back to basics movement. At the time, glam rock and prog rock were the powerhouses with their fancy hair and fancy recording. So pub rock was a scene that was against the mainstream. In essence, it was just regular rock, but with a DIY attitude by recording songs yourself, releasing music independently, you know what it is. But what does this have to do with punk? Well, pub rock in the United Kingdom helped launch the British punk scene. It provided a network of small venues and independent record labels. Notice I mentioned a DIY ethics. That was pretty punk for a rock subgenre to do. Punk sharing similar values, it was a no-brainer for the two scenes to mesh. Bands like Dr. Feelgood and Eddie and the Hot Rods were a part of this scene, helping set the stage for the rise of punk.
Queercore.
In the 80s, queercore was born, not only as a subgenre of punk, but a cultural movement, combining punk and gay identities while rejecting mainstream values. Queercore was a safe space for, well, queer people. Of course, branching off of punk, DIY played a big part of this scene, not only having lyrical themes about being pissed off at society for disapproving being gay, but also touching on things like personal gender identity issues. The genre came in different forms of other genres too, like hardcore, electropunk, indie rock, power punk, and so much more. And not only this, but queercore scene also expresses itself in more than just music, using films, writing, and magazines. You can check out bands like Dix and Big Boys and the Apostles who really helped shape the scene.
Proto-punk.
I did mention this earlier, but proto-punk is basically punk before it had a name. Proto-punk are the caveman bands, and then punk bands are the Homo sapiens or erectuses or whatever we are. Yeah, that's me. I'm erectus right now while recording. I'm kidding. No, I'm not. I don't know what we are. Sapiens? I think we're sapiens. But proto-punk refers to the music from the mid-60s to mid-70s that laid the groundwork for punk before it officially emerged. Punk wasn't a thing yet, nor were people trying to make it a thing. It was just bands that were making raw, energetic music that happened to inspire the next generation. It's such a weird thing to think about. It's like proto-punk was punk's big bang or whatever.
Riot Girl.
Riot Girl is a feminist punk subculture that began in the 90s. It combines punk, politics, and third wave feminism into one big movement and culture. This was a movement that started in Washington but expanded worldwide. The songs touch on topics like rape, domestic abuse, sexuality, and female empowerment on top of traditional punk themes like classism, racism, anarchism. Anarchism. Did I say? I think I said it right. Anarchism. Bands most associated with this movement include Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, and Heavens to Betsy.
Glam punk.
Glam punk is pretty self-explanatory. It fused punk with glam rock, and we can thank the New York Dolls for being one of the pioneers for this subgenre. It began early to mid 70s, and what's interesting about glam punk is a lot of it was also considered proto-punk, because remember, punk emerged in the mid 70s, and the New York Dolls already had a glam punk album by 73, being influenced by acts like the Brats, the Stilettos, and Ruby and the Rednecks. The music is strange because it's fast, it's distorted, while fusing it with bubblegum pop.
Oi.
Oi is punk that came out of the UK in the late 70s. The name Oi literally comes from the British working class, as they greet each other by saying Oi! And this gives you a good idea of how straightforward this genre of music was meant to be. There's no hidden meanings, there's no subliminal messages, it's the basic stripped down punk sound with songs about working class life, street culture, and raw energy without trying to be fancy. The fanciest you'll get is like shreddy guitar or some shit. And I think what's fun about Oi is how catchy it can be. Like if you listen to the Cockney Rejects, it sounds like music you can shout to with your homies at a bar. Cockney Rejects and Sham 69 are good examples of Oi. They kept the songs simple and relatable with a focus on real life themes rather than music being overly political. Not to say politics isn't real life, by the way. And for a genre that barely touches on politics, the scene got into political controversy as the media portrayed the genre as having right-wing racist politics attached to it. In 1981, South Hall riots kicked off at an Oi punk show. The local South Asian community were concerned about far-right skinheads attending the show, so they protested outside of the venue. The bands weren't racist, but tensions exploded into violence. And the shitty part is this whole incident unfairly tarnished Oi music's reputation by associating it with racial tensions. I don't really blame the Asian community for protesting. It was just a bunch of miscommunication because this area had previously faced racist attacks towards the Asian community. So of course they wanted to stand their ground if a rumor goes around saying neo were attending this show. But a lot of Oi bands actually spoke against racism, but the South Hall incident made it harder for them to shake the association. The history of Oi is insane.
No Wave.
No Wave was a short but intense art punk scene in the late 70s that basically said, let's reject everything about normal music. A big part of punk is the barrier of entry is pretty low. You don't have to be super skilled to play punk. Not to say punk is bad. I love punk. I'm making this hour-long video on it. But the reality is you don't have to be some sort of music god to play power chords really, really fast. But I mentioned this to say No Wave takes this a step further. Not only do we not have to be skilled, but we don't even need to make what most people would call music. Fuck trying to make catchy tunes. I want to make challenging art. And to explain the name of this genre, around this time, New Wave was becoming a popular genre. So No Wave was basically a direct rejection of it. Welcome to Layer 7, and goddamn, we're about to get weird. These are genres that are going to start keeping you up at night. And again, setting up for more obscure genres later down this list, because trust me, it does get weirder.
Dark punk.
Dark punk mixes the raw, rebellious energy of traditional punk with darker, more atmospheric elements. There's slower tempos, minor keys, and haunting tones. This genre is a melting pot of different genres like post-punk, goth rock, and even industrial. While lyrically the genre explores themes like alienation, despair, and dystopian realities, dark punk also incorporates gothic imagery and a moody aesthetic, with bands often using black clothing and eerie visuals. A notable band would be Christian Death, but bands like Bauhaus, I hope I said that right, and The Cure were some to influence this genre, but more on that later.
Horror punk.
Horror punk is a subgenre that combines punk with horror themes and imagery. The most influential horror punk band is The Misfits. I'm sure you know who they are. I'm sure you've seen their logo somewhere as it got bigger than the band itself. But it's a cool genre because it's punk music with a Halloween aesthetic essentially. Lyrics about horror movies, monsters, death, and the supernatural. And it's like goofy theatrical dark, not really like real life dark, because there's horror makeup and costumes and imagery. It's fun scary, not I'm listening to this and anxious that the world is gonna implode one day scary. By the way, there is a gray area, of course. Here the line is in between horror punk and psychobilly, as some bands play both, Misfits being one of those bands. Other cool acts to check out are Cancer Slug, Wednesday 13, and Blitzkid.
Gothic punk.
Gothic punk combines punk's energy with dark and gloomy themes, also incorporating gothic rock elements. It is similar to dark punk, but the difference is Gothic punk leans more heavily on the Victorian era aesthetics and the Gothic aesthetics, while incorporating elements of traditional Gothic rock, while dark punk focuses on a more raw, aggressive sound with darker themes. And dark punk draws influence from post-punk and sometimes even death rock, and don't really have a gothic aesthetic. While both dark punk and gothic punk explore dark themes, gothic might focus more on death, the supernatural, and romanticism, while dark punk could dive more into social commentary and rebellion. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but there is a gray line because a band like The Cure can be considered both of these genres.
Crustcore.
Crustcore takes crust punk but takes it in a hardcore direction. Think of regular crust punk but cranked up to 11. Everything is more intense, faster drumming, harsher vocals, heavier guitar distortion. And of course, in crust punk fashion, the music is deliberately aggressive and unpolished. Here you can check out Include Doom, Extinction of Mankind, and Extreme Noise Terror.
Glam.
This combines the tough working class bovver boy culture with glam rock's theatrical elements. And if you don't know, bovver boy is a British term for a rowdy, violent fella that enjoys trouble and are pretty often skinheads. I feel like I should probably clear something up here, because when somebody hears skinhead, they automatically assume neo when it's not entirely the case. Being a skinhead was a subculture in the 60s that started in the UK. Initially, being a skinhead was about working class pride, rebellion, and embracing a love for ska, reggae, and early punk music. Skinheads had a strong sense of community and unity, often rejecting the mainstream and focusing on their own style and music. However, a faction of skinheads became associated with far-right politics, especially in the 80s, often aligning themselves with neo or white views. And of course, this message is going to spread way faster and way further than the initial wholesome message. So when someone thinks skinhead, they're going to automatically assume the racist variant. It is lame to see a culture get hijacked, especially like taking it and making it dark, but what can we do? Back to the genre. It was basically a bridge between the glam rock scene and what would later become punk. Imagine tough street kids wearing platform boots and glitter, but are still ready to throw hands if needed.
Celtic punk.
Celtic punk is a genre that combines punk with traditional Celtic music. So it'll blend fast punk rhythms with instruments like bagpipes, fiddles, and accordions, and often features lyrics about Irish culture, history, and social issues. Popular bands here would be Dropkick Murphys and Flogging Molly.
Celtic hardcore.
This is Celtic punk, but the hardcore variant. And you know what that means. It's more aggressive, faster, heavier. I suggest you check out Goon, because those motherfuckers are crazy.
Christian punk.
You can take a fat guess at this one. It's just punk but written by God guys, so the lyrics would include Christianity, faith, and hope. Here we have the Lifesavers, the Altar Boys, and the Crucified.
Math punk / mathcore.
Math punk and mathcore both focus on complex, unconventional rhythms and time signatures, but they differ in their overall sound and intensity. Math punk is a blend of punk and math rock. Intricate guitar riffs, odd time signatures, and experimental structures, but it still keeps the energy and speed of punk. It's more melodic and less aggressive than mathcore. Think of it as a more technical and complex form of punk. Think of bands like Polvo and Battles. Mathcore, on the other hand, is a more intense and heavier genre that combines elements of hardcore, metal, and math rock. Complex rhythms, more chaotic, more abrasive. In short, math punk is a more melodic, punk-influenced version of math rock, while mathcore is heavier, more chaotic, and blends hardcore metal with technical complexity. Think of Converge or the Dillinger Escape Plan. We're at layer 8. We're almost there. If you know every genre I'm about to touch on, I need you to go outside and touch some fucking grass, dude. Here we get into combination genres and genres that are more unique and have really cool sounds.
Power pop punk.
We already know what pop punk is, but where does power come from? In short, power pop punk is more melodic and polished, drawing heavily from the 60s style pop, while pop punk is more mainstream and focused on catchy emotional punk with a pop twist. Basically, different flavors of pop, as power pop punk can be Exploding Hearts and the Queers, while pop punk can be Green Day and Blink-182.
Punk blues.
Think of it as a mix of classic blues riffs with punk's energy and DIY spirit. It blends the raw, rebellious energy of punk with the soulful, gritty feel of blues. Stripped down music with rough, distorted guitars, and lyrically deals with themes of hardship, rebellion, and frustration, similar to traditional blues. The punk aspect brings in faster tempos and a more aggressive, edgy attitude. Some notable bands are The Gun Club and the John Spencer Blues Explosion.
Dark wave.
Back in the late 70s, there was a new wave and post-punk movement. As we know, no wave rebelled against this, but on the other corner of the music scene, dark wave was born. It blended both new wave and post-punk, but made it darker by using atmospheric sounds, haunting melodies, synthesizers, and moody introspective lyrics. The vibe is more eerie and atmospheric compared to traditional new wave, especially with themes of sadness, alienation, and self-analysis.
Doom punk.
It's like a mix of doom metal's heaviness and punk's aggression, creating a sound that's both intense and grim. Heavy, slow, and bleak elements of doom metal combined with the raw energy of punk. Here we explore themes like despair, apocalyptic visions, and dread. And some bands that fit this style would include Backcountry and Electric Wizard, but they are more known for doom metal. They just have some punk influences.
Drone punk.
Drone punk combines punk's raw energy with drone music's long, sustained tones and minimalistic approach. Instead of fast, short songs, drone punk tracks are often long and trance-like, using feedback and distortion to create atmospheric sounds. The punk aspect comes into play because it borrows its rebellious energy along with loud, distorted guitars, and it makes it slow and mesmerizing rather than fast and aggressive. Key bands include Earth's early work and growing.
Ambient punk.
Ambient punk blends the energy of punk with the atmospheric elements of ambient music. It keeps punk's raw attitude but adds slower, more atmospheric layers to the music, creating a dreamy, introspective vibe. The sound often feels more spaced out and experimental while still holding on to punk's rebellious roots. It may sound similar to drone punk, but drone punk is harsher and more repetitive, while ambient punk is more atmospheric and introspective. Bands that use ambient elements in their punk tunes are the Dead Sea and some of Sonic Youth.
Horrorbilly.
This is basically rockabilly music made for horror fans. It's closely related to psychobilly, but puts more emphasis on horror themes. While psychobilly mixes rockabilly with punk and horror elements, horrorbilly leans harder into the spooky stuff. Horror movie references, zombie themes, darker lyrics, creepier vocals. Good examples are Cult of the Psychic Fetus, The Other, and The Creep Show.
Blackened punk.
This is when black metal and hardcore make a weird, smelly hybrid. It's characterized by fast tempos, distorted guitars, and screamed vocals. The lyrics often focus on themes of nihilism, misanthropy, and anti-establishment. It's very raw and aggressive and super underground. And I think what really makes it cool is it's a true combination, because a lot of the subgenres I'm talking about is basically X genre with punk roots. But blackened punk or blackened hardcore really is a combination, as it focuses on atmosphere building as well. You can check out Jackman and Pissblood.
Death rock.
This blends dark, gothic, and post-punk elements in one. It's slower and more atmospheric than regular punk, with lyrics about death, the supernatural, and despair. The bands often have a goth look with dark clothing and dramatic makeup. It overlaps with goth rock, but the key differences would be death rock keeps more of punk's raw energy and horror elements, while goth rock is more polished and romantically dark. The two genres are typically lumped together because both scenes influenced each other pretty heavily, and many bands cross between the two styles. Check out 45 Grave and the Super Heroines.
D-beat.
This is cool because it's focused on the drumming pattern. D-beat is a style of hardcore named after this distinctive drum beat used by the band Discharge. It has a specific rhythm pattern that goes, and the D and D beat comes from the band Discharge. Think of regular punk, but faster and more aggressive, always using this particular drum beat as its foundation.
Industrial punk.
Industrial punk is a mix of punk's energy with the harsh, mechanical sound of industrial music. You have your distorted guitars, electronic beats, and heavy abrasive sounds. The lyrics tend to focus on dystopian themes, alienation, and social issues, and bands to check out are Big Black or early Nine Inch Nails. It's just punk with a mechanical industrial twist. God damn. Layer 9, we find out people make genres out of anything. We made it. Get Bandcamp ready because you're gonna have to dive deep to find bands here. Some of these genres are weird, some are badass, and some are just confusing.
Cowpunk.
This is a melting pot of punk, country, folk, and blues. But this is often considered an umbrella term, like how we spoke about art punk earlier. But what's cool is it's kind of influenced by the alternative country scene of the late 90s, early 2000s. You can check out Meat Puppets, The Blasters, and Social Distortion.
Surf punk.
This combines punk and surf rock, mostly more pop punk lenient as it's known for its fast-paced distorted guitar riffs, surf-styled reverb, and aggressive vocals. Drain is a hardcore band that's blowing up right now, and I feel like some songs can definitely be surfy, but some true surf punk bands to check out would be Agent Orange, Waves, and Surf Punks.
Kawaii punk.
We've all heard of kawaii metal, but what the fuck is kawaii punk? Well, it's pretty much exactly what you're thinking right now. It's just punk that combines kawaii elements. I'm sure you know, but kawaii means cute in Japanese, but it grew into some sort of like style and culture as well. But songs will typically sound aggressive with cute high-pitched vocals using elements of Japanese pop music. Here you can check out Chai.
Clockwork.
Clockwork is inspired by steampunk and Victorian era aesthetics. It combines punk with mechanical industrial sounds, often touching on themes of machinery, clocks, and clockwork technology. And it's often linked to steampunk culture. But I'm not 100% sure on this because I read somewhere else that this is a genre that's inspired by the Clockwork Orange movie. I don't know. I've only seen Clockwork Orange once. Not gonna lie, I fell asleep. It was the middle of the night. Should I rewatch? I hear it all the time. Do you guys like that movie? I don't know. Let me know.
Quantum punk.
It's punk, but for the smart fellas. It's punk with lyrics about quantum physics, science fiction, and technology. Exploring concepts like parallel universes, time travel, and quantum mechanics, the music is typically experimental, blending elements of punk with electronic, industrial, or noise influences to help tell the tale of chaotic and unpredictable nature of quantum theory. God damn, that was wordy. I need to start using punctuations in my script. But this genre is so abstract, so niche, it's actually hilarious that it exists.
Academic punk.
You thought that last genre was nerdy? Well, let me tell you about academic punk. It's punk that features complex lyrics that explore philosophical, political, or sociological concepts and include references to literature, history, or theory. There's a big focus on thought-provoking content, and bands in this genre may use more intricate structures or unconventional approaches. If you like to critically think and just bump to punk, this is for you.
Anarcho-syndicalist punk.
Anarcho-syndicalist punk is more specific. It's tied to labor rights and workers' movements, while anarcho-punk is a lot broader and it focuses on anti-authoritarian and anti-oppressive themes.
Cyberpunk.
You've definitely heard of cyberpunk, but maybe in a aesthetic way, like the game or anime or whatever. But cyberpunk music is a style of electronic music that combines techno, industrial, and alternative rock, obviously associated with the cyberpunk subculture. This can be considered an umbrella term as well because you have music that's more synthwave or straight up techno, but lyrically it's dark and has dystopian themes. It can be about technology, cybernetics, and virtual reality. Check out bands like Girl Pusher and No Thank You.
Chiptune punk.
Chiptune punk is similar to Nintendo Core, and if you've watched my channel before, I'm more than positive you've heard me talk about Nintendo Core. But chiptune punk is more about punk energy with 8-bit sound, while Nintendo Core is heavier, blending punk, metal, and chiptune for a more intense style, like deathcore or metalcore. With chiptune punk, the focus is more on the punk attitude and themes, while the chiptune elements give it a retro video game feel. Check out Adam and His Package. That's the name of someone's band. I'm not asking you to check out your buddy Adam's Meat.
Synth punk.
This is when punk combines electronic music with it. They'll use distorted synthesizers, drum machines, and other electronic instruments with a gritty and high energy atmosphere. Bands like the Screamers, the Normal, and Brainiac play with this kind of stuff.
Spiritual punk.
It's pretty much like Christian punk, but it's not about like religion specifically. This blends the rebellious spirit of punk with themes of spirituality and introspection, exploring themes like personal growth, enlightenment, self-discovery, and higher consciousness. While still embracing punk's anti-establishment roots, it seeks deeper meaning beyond the usual critiques of society and authority.
Zen punk.
Imagine Christian punk, but the focus is on Buddhism rather than Christianity. Mindfulness, simplicity, and the sense of inner peace.
Riot folk.
Riot folk blends folk's music storytelling and acoustic sound with punk's focus on activism, rebellion, and social change. A lot of the time, it's acoustic with simple raw instrumentation like guitars, banjos, and fiddles, but it focuses on protest, social justice, and activism. Riot folk is all about challenging the system, but in a more melodic way compared to traditional punk.
Scum punk.
Scum punk is known for its disregard for safety, morals, and hygiene. It's raw and chaotic, often focusing on nihilism and social rejection. The sound is often distorted, noisy, and unpolished with influences from garage punk and grindcore.
Solo.
Solo music is a genre that combines new wave, prog rock, and punk energy with a quirky aesthetic. It's often experimental and it's characterized by unconventional rhythms, complex song structures, and a mix of eccentric, playful, and sometimes surreal aesthetics. It's known for its odd, off-kilter sound and is often associated with bands and artists who push musical boundaries, and they just really enjoy blending genres. Here you'll find the weirdest of the weird. You could check out Devo, Oingo Boingo, or the Cardiac. We are officially at the final layer of the iceberg, layer 10. And there is one genre in this layer, and that genre is
Ultra experimental punk variants.
This is my fancy way of saying all of the above. There's countless of punk subgenres that have like 2 fucking bands in it, so it's super hard to research, but like I said 1,000 times, I did my best. What genres did I miss? I know I missed grindcore, but that's because it's on my every subgenre of metal iceberg, which you can check out right here. Go watch that and let me know what iceberg I should do next.